this URL path is equal to another one.
Okay, so yeah, so if we've got, I think we've got maybe 200 blogs. So would that be 200 lines?
It would, yeah. I can't really think of any other way around it unless you were able to pass something in the code alongside it. So just an example of how that might look. So say within the page names that get set, I think via the CMS.
Yeah.
So within Sitecore. So all I'm going to do now is just quickly jump into a debugging tool. So this is just going to be used just to like kind of take us through what type of firing link page and potentially an approach you guys might be able to use to be able to split out between those two.
Sure.
So if I drop that URL in and open up just Chrome extension for DevTools. Switch that to the bottom window. Cool. So this is essentially just showing me all the tags that are firing across the site, or whatever page is just loaded. Potentially what you guys might be able to do is include something within, say, the page name. So something around here. So something that could say, this is the page name, and then just on the end of it, blog, or something like that. But then you'd know that despite both pages using the same URL structure, all of your pages have been tagged up differently, so therefore it's sticking out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if we search, so right there it says on page name, health information, health blog.
Yeah.
So would we be able to use that as it is with using that health blog? Because I don't think health blog would appear on the PR articles. Would that be right, Faye?
Let's have a double check. If that's true, then yeah, good to go on that. Yeah. So by the looks of it, the page name's not being set for anything to do with health blog. So let's have a look at how that would look. So if I was to change out this segment, going back to the one that I started creating before, and change this over to page name. And then it says contains health blog, not health blog, how I pronounce it. That's the right one. Cool. So if I hit save on that, and then, so you might have noticed when I was pulling that together, I left that at a hit level. So you can see that I've left that to be a hit. The reasoning being behind this now means that I'll be able to validate what is included within that rather than just looking at all the visits that saw a page that contains that. We're just going to return all the pages that do meet this rule. So every single time that event actually happens, it's going to return that out. So what I'm able to do now, if I return page name, you could then potentially run that against that list that you've already said you could pull together and just say, are we happy that this contains everything? Would that work for you, Dylan?
I think so, yeah. It looks like it would. So essentially from my health management dashboard, we could create a segment. We could segment that so it contains, so it's health management pages, doesn't contain newsroom, but contains health blog.
Yeah.
And that should then give me a total of everything health management related.
Correct. So you
Okay.
could either do it like that or just do it as the inverse of it. So if I was to go back into editing this segment I've just created, and then if you click option here, you can just say exclude. So granted, that would then cover every single page across site. So it would return maybe 99%.
Okay. Well, okay. That
But
sounds
yeah,
good.
exactly right. So then you could just drag in an additional container and move that to there. So the reason being why I've layered that up is because then you can exclude just a container and include the rest of it. So therefore, if you were to add in URL and say the exact same thing that we had before, what was it, contains help-information. That would then return a segment of all of your pages from that contain health information, but then exclude the health blog pages.
Okay, so yeah, so we could set it up so that it includes everything under health information. Yeah, yeah, that's starting to make sense. I think I need to have another play around with it, but yeah, it seems to be making sense.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, that's just kind of an example of how you can kind of layer up different elements within that, but include some and then exclude others, right? So you could use that across the board. So say, for example, you wanted to look at just PPC traffic, but exclude mobile out of that. So we do that in the same way. So just starting fresh from this. So without any containers or anything. The way that I do that is just looking at the top right there, create a new container, then drop in mobile device type equals mobile phone, but because we don't want to use that, exclude that one, and then last touch channel, drag it in above it. So it's the same as on all the other Adobe platforms. It'll drop where you can see that line create. So the same as like when you're using a freeform table, if you can see that black line appear, that's where it's going to be dropping it. So say if I was to remove this out again, and then you can see it appear there, so that's within that same container. You drop it in and then it enters into that rather than creating a new one or a new layer on top of that almost. So because we've added that to that container, that's part of that same segment that's saying exclude. But to finish this off, let's drop that in above it, equals PPC, and that's it. So we then just create a segment that's include this and exclude that. Cool. So does that help you guys out at all there, Dylan?
Yeah, I
Maybe
think it
not
really does.
specifically, but
Well, yeah, as I say, I think it's just I'll probably watch this one back again and have a little play around again. But yeah, I think that's the theory behind that seems to answer what I was coming up against. So yeah, definitely, thanks.
perfect, not a problem. One thing that I'd recommend, I think I've said this on a few of the classes now, but I'd recommend that everyone tries to log a ticket with IS and gets access to the Chrome dev extension, and then from there request access to Data Slayer, just because that's really useful for debugging tags across the site. I think some of the customer journey guys use the Adobe Analytics one, but it's not always functional and it's not the easiest to use, whereas this, like you saw, this covers pretty much every tag on site. So say some of the areas on site that we've got Google Tag Manager on, so BPK, Google Command. You can see there that that gives me my list of URLs that are loaded, and then the little logo in the top left indicates what's providing that, so we can see that that's a Google Tag Manager logo, so that's what's providing those tags there. Just really useful for kind of just covering everything else that's loaded off the back of it. Cool. So I suppose to get into it, does anyone have any problems with anything they've been having this week, or anything they want to bring to the table to run through or look at? Okay. So,
Without wanting to monopolise the call,
oh, that's absolutely fine.
I know we were having a look at last week. We were looking at some null items,
Yeah.
and Faye actually raised the ServiceNow ticket with the dev team. I don't know if you want to. Do you want to pick it up, Faye? And
Yeah, of course. So I sort of raised it for Stefan's. Well, I spoke to Stefan over email, and he asked me to log a ticket. They had a look, and they came back and said they've sent across an Excel spreadsheet, which sadly doesn't mean a huge amount to us, but might mean a bit more to you guys. They're basically saying that the extra field where the null data is coming from isn't available from our side of things. So they've closed the incident because they think that it's an Adobe issue. So they're saying the analytics team needs to work with Adobe to figure out the issue, since the script null is not being populated from our code. So I don't know, when they say the analytics team, I don't know if that's you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I presume so. Yeah, no worries.
Well, shall I share that spreadsheet? Shall I share their couple of notes that they've put and the spreadsheet? Shall I email that over to you, Christian? And then if you're able to help, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, certainly, if you want to fire that over. I think we'll take that one offline, looking at it, just because I think that's going to get into quite niche territories, and
Yeah.
probably everyone will just spend the next half an hour watching me flounder and try and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, so I'll ping you an email then.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank
We
you.
can raise that with the team over at Adobe and see if they've got any kind of feedback on it.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem at all. Cool. So I guess I did have one thing I wanted to share with everyone, because it's something that we've been working on in our previous sprint, and think it might be useful to quite a few of the guys. Just a bit of a run through on that, and then a bit of a touch on segments again. Just kind of the two feed into each other. Yeah, move on to that as long as everyone else is going up.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Right. Navigate on to that. I've now got to the point, and I imagine pretty much everyone on the call will, once you start playing all around in Workspace, that you end up with this just endless wall of different projects. Cool. So my reasoning behind pulling this together was, we noticed quite a lot of the same comments and requests coming in across the teams. So basically we wanted to be able to build a generic report for everybody to use, and then should anything more bespoke come up, then we can build that as and when. So this was just kind of a concatenation of what are the main requests that come in and how do we want to deal with that. So from here, to kind of pull out what are the main top line metrics that generally get asked for. So unique visitors, visits, page views, the bounce rate, how many phone calls generated, what percentage of visits in this segment have made a call, how many forms completed, and just FYI to everyone, this is a generic forms completed, so as in of every visit that meets this segment, how many of them completed a form across the board, depending on how you filter that down. And then of your total number of visits, what percentage of those have completed a form. Then device type breakdown, and then we can channel visits and phone calls broken down. So you can see that splits out between how many visits, then how many phone calls. Then just looking over the last 12 months, how did those visits and calls trend? Cool, so at the minute, this is very generic. This is applied to literally everyone across site, so you could then just change date parameters and look, okay, across the entirety of the site, how has this looked for all of April? And then you'd obviously end up with figures like 4 million page views, which isn't really that specific and doesn't give you all that much clarity in terms of looking into stuff. So, if we want to kind of branch out on this a bit further, the main intention of this report is for everyone to be able to kind of just add segments in and then filter it down to certain little bits of it. So, within this, what I'm going to focus on is I'm going to build a segment just looking at people that view the Group Broadband homepage, just to pluck one out of the air. So, where we're going to do this is just creating a standard segment. So, just as normal, going to create a segment, and then we'll do Group On Demand, homepage, test. Cool, so this is the exact same as what we've done in pretty much every session we've done so far, I think. Just kind of building up this segment of how do we want this to look. So from here we're going to say URL path then equals So one thing to note within this report is something that I mentioned earlier on, is this little drop down is really going to impact how things look within this report. So if you were to select hit at this point, that's just going to return you the metrics of just from that page. So things like how many visits have we just on this page, how many page views have just happened on this page. Whereas if we were to swap this out for visit, we then see how many page views have happened of everybody that's seen this page in general. So it's not exclusive to that page, it's just exclusive to the visits that saw that page. Does that make sense? That makes sense to everyone on my phone? Because it's kind of a difficult concept to explain without waving my hands around. Cool. One little nuance that I kind of wanted to bring up in this as well, and just touch on, is just how the response tab data comes through. So response tab, for everyone that doesn't know, is how we track calls that come through our website and where did they come from. So the one thing to note in here, if you were to put in our team and colon, you can see all these fields populate. That's because the response tab passes all this information through to Adobe, which is obviously super useful, particularly in like page reporting and things like that, because this means that if we were just interested in everything that happened on this page, we could then filter it down to how many phone calls that we have from this page, how many visits, and just in a one-stop shop, how has this page performed in this time period. The way to do that is when you're building up the segments, you need to include the conversion page, which I'd recommend anytime you're looking into the number of phone calls or anything like that across it, you make sure you're filtering on the conversion page. So, as I'm saying, this is the URL that I'm looking at, or this conversion page. And the conversion page just refers to, once this call terminated, where was this visitor looking at? So it's not necessarily what page spawned that call, which it would be on the response tab login itself, because response tab only sends that information over to Adobe once the call's terminated. It means that we've got a bit of disparity between the conversion page we see on response tab's end and then the conversion page we see on Adobe's end. So it's not always matching, because that's something we've flagged with them.
In risk of it getting too techy for me, like for the wide audience. So when you're on the phone call and the response tab's like, plugging along, knows when the start and the end of that phone call is, once that phone call ends, how does the response tab pass the value through aligning to a particular page back into one of your variables within?
So it doesn't go into a particular variable. It doesn't use helium at all.
It just stays, and then we would have to do the manual reconciliation later on. Okay.
So it literally just fires information straight from response tab into Adobe.
Yeah.
So that's why you'll see none of this information in helium.
Okay. Okay. And then that metric that we can see there, though, that is populated by just the Adobe page. Whenever it ends, it'll just close it, stop it as a session and flag what that last page was, or? So
response tab will just capture it and then send it off in the exact same way as the rest of the information.
Okay. Okay.
But I think it's just a bit of latency between the two.
Which is why you always see those, mismatching numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So in response pack conversion page is the page that they got to have the number of dials on. And you said in Adobe the conversion page is the last page they're on when they make the call.
So I think the actual variance of that was pretty small, but it's just as if you do ever reconcile between the two data sets like we've done previously, there might be a variance, and that's why. So that was the answer that we got back to response up into the So to be able to like plug into this and move forward, all you do there is just say, okay, I'm going to look at that.
Can you change those rules? Sorry.
Essentially, but they didn't make it sound like it.
There's no motive, but...
They didn't make it sound like it.
Because if you change your rules as to what you want to define as the conversion page, like if you wanted to like put brackets around what you would call like relevant conversion page, if that makes any sense, you'd be able to do that.
I hope so, but they didn't make it sound like that.
Okay, because like say for example, you know, I convert on a BBY page and I call and I have the conversation, you know, I'm having a jolly all the time, and then I'll see something on the page that says, you know, event next week in around the corner, and you're just thinking, oh, what's going on next week? And then it's like, that's the conversion page.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Do I want to borderline restrict it to, you know, particular boundaries?
Yeah, and that's what I prefer. I prefer to have the one version of the truth. But like I say, they didn't make it sound as though...
Who was that response on?
Because that's what we flagged it with, since we know it's the variance.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good to know it.
Just moving on from that. So, it is literally the case we've got in. That's HTTPS. Right. So you'll notice that these URLs in the conversion path pull back the entire domain name as well as something like that. So you can either do it in the same way that I'm doing there, and pulling in the full URL, or you can just do contains because you're doing an all function within it. So you don't need to worry about impacting the number of visits or anything like that coming through it. It will just be impacting the call figure that's coming through, any of the response at metrics as well. That is essentially the segment that I'm going to create. That is going to be returning me all the information around boot from demand homepage, and how many calls have been generated from that page as well. And because I say it's a hit, everything is just going to be exclusive to that page. It's not going to be looking at people that have seen that page, it's just that one. And I'm sorry to go on and on and on and on about the difference between hit and visits. It took me ages to get my head around it. And it is one of those things just trying to differentiate between the two. Cool. So we can see that that's made absolutely no difference to the report. Because what we need to do now is take the segment and just drop it in the top where it highlights it. And there you see, so now everything's updated and we've got a snapshot of all those users, channel splits, phone calls, how many forms completed, device type, everything like that. So should you ever want to pull this off and look at it on a week by week basis, you could just export it using this tool and just select a couple of weeks and then look through the two. So yeah, that's pretty much the report in a nutshell. We do have a full guide that goes alongside it as well, so I'll make sure those get distributed after the session. But yeah, other than that, I think if anyone's got any feedback on this as well, that'd be really helpful, because this kind of report in particular really does everyone a lot of time, because it means that it's just there as a tool for everyone to use. So rather than having to keep building the same report to say, okay, how many visits have we had on this page and how many phone calls, we can just have a one-stop shop that's really useful for everyone to use. So if there's anything in there that you can't see and you'd expect to see, just give us a shout and hopefully we can add it in pretty quickly.
Is Natalie on the call?
I think so.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey Natalie, a question I wanted to ask you is this sort of dashboard based on, I guess, the time for when Chris and I wasn't here, and I know, well, I'm under the impression that you got asked a lot of these questions. Do you feel like we've met our aim or objective to deal with the majority, say 80, 85, 90% of requests that are coming through on page reporting with this dashboard? We feel like it, but do you feel like there's gaps that you would recognise people would ask you?
Nothing's come up that I can recall. I think just in general with the workspace report, sometimes the data doesn't always pull through, but and we see a bit of a mismatch. But no, all really good.
Okay, cool.
I think that might be the only vulnerability that we do leave ourselves open to, and that was kind of one thing that I was a bit concerned about before, in the sense, particularly in like building segments and things like that. So you mentioned about the mismatch of data. So I think the one thing to be really clear about when you're pulling this together and when you're sharing this information with everyone, just saying, this is the segment that I've used, and here's how it's defined, and I've used an AND statement at this point, and an OR statement at this point, and this is where the containers are, and this is what's excluded. Because I think if everyone's reading from the same workspace, essentially, that's the only thing that can cause a variance. So that kind of, I was on the same page with you, and that's why we wanted to release the supporting materials around it as well, and make sure we had a session like this, just so that way everyone can kind of have their initial intro, and yeah, and always have something to refer back to.
Cool.
Sweet.
Can I ask, this kind of seems like a high-level view.
Yeah.
So if I was looking at, say, the S&C section, but then there's multiple pages within that, would you add those all different, would you have to do it individually as segments, or could you have one view that breaks down all the pages so you can see it together?
What you could do, and it's something that I've realised I quite like doing, but it will massively slow down your report. So if I was to right-click on the top there, you can see that opens up another panel. All I'd do from there is just say duplicate.
And you can just add a different segment.
Exactly.
Okay.
So then you can say, okay, there's my top line one. And then from there, this is going to be the home page. And then from there, it's going to be this, and this, and this.
But you can just save them for future reference.
Exactly.
Cool, that's good.
I think the only other thing that's missing within this, and there was logic behind it, is going into then to a URL level within certain segments. But the reason behind that was just because it's not always going to be relevant, and it can also really grow out the report. So that could be something that potentially we can add in if there's some kind of additional.
Well, we've got, like, we've already covered through this session anyway, with like free-form tables and stuff like that anyway, so if there's a need for you to go to a lower level of granularity, you have the option to be able to build that out as well.
But hopefully this should flag it to you. So, I mean, say for example, if you were first off just looking at this report and you go, oh wow, something massively happened within December, that's when you can start to dig into it a bit further and go further with it.
Yeah, cool.
Another thing as well is, if you were to build a free-form table and identify a particular URL page that you need to keep an eye on going forward, then take that URL and put that in here, so that you can say, okay, this is obviously a problem, these are all the different things I'm going to do within my area to be able to curb the results that we've observed. And then you refer back to this dashboard as you implement these different things to see whether or not any of the changes you've made in your respective area has had a positive influence on what you're seeing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think yeah, it's that sort of technique that I think people kind of lack. They want to see everything all the time at the same time. Whereas I think you need to understand what are the different things that are influencing your result the most. Focus on those and improve. When you improve that, then holistically you should start to see better results.
I think one thing to be aware of as well, just because I'm aware that I only tend to focus on like URL segments and stuff like that, and this applies to absolutely anything. So if you wanted to split it down by anyone that's entered the female gender in the BBY funnel, you could throw that into there and then find out a lot of additional information around that. And it's just, yeah, it's there as a tool for everyone to kind of pull it apart and just add bits to it, hopefully. So off the back of that, we'll share all the additional resources around using it and stuff. And yeah, open, like, if just leave it as an open invite. If you guys find anything you want adding into that, just let us know and we'll get it in.
Sweet.
Sweet. So I think unless there's anything further to go on to, have you got anything else you want to bring up, Marie?
Yeah. So just to summarise. So, Dylan, are you comfortable with everything that you've done with the platform?
Yeah, so far. I think, yeah, once I get this kind of segmentation right, I think it'd be good to do a bit of a deep dive in some of our areas, but probably need a bit more support on that. But yeah, so far so good.
Okay, cool. And then the other thing with the key metrics dashboard, you'll communicate that out more broadly. And then, yeah, cool. Then we'll take it as it comes to the next agenda and all that sort of stuff. One thing that I wanted to flesh your mind on, which might be relevant to you guys as well, is taking a look at optimizing tests that are coming through.
Cool, yeah. Can I have a look into that?
I've always got more things there.
Sweet.
Because I think that way you guys, sometimes if you've been asked a question as to how a test is performing, you're way for them, or if there's something gone wrong with their, you can access the reports, the live reports. This gives you a contingency plan to be able to take a look at.
So if something potentially wasn't tracking through the link we're using Optimizely, might it be through Adobe?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Cool. So to give the full end-to-end kind of picture on this again, I'm going to go back to using my debugger on that. I was prepared to go like the full journey of everything, just because it then gives you a full bit of context of where the information is coming from, how that looks like in a raw format, and then how that gets through to Adobe. So if I scroll down a little bit further till I see it. Cool. So I mapped the optimized variants to prop 71. So props are essentially the custom variables that we set up within Adobe. This is essentially the same, rather than what is a standard path, so like what's the channel or things like that. These can be custom JavaScript events that we send through. So it's pretty useful for really unique cases and things like that.
So if you kind of imagine an Excel spreadsheet, column E to G or something like that might be empty slots where you can put whatever data value to populate in those things.
So the thing that we pulled across from there is the Optimizely experiment ID and the variant ID, which looks like this. So you can see these are colon delimited, and then when it moves to its next experiment, it'll do it with a semicolon. It looks a lot simpler when it's not in mine. So the reason that you end up with a load of different ones like that is if you're always on the site like we are. So if you guys start to look at your own as well, you'll see that it just kind of accumulates, because it adds it onto the end of it, because obviously you want to see that full chain of what's impacted that user.
Where is it? I don't think it's on our screen.
You want to see it?
I see up to 52. There you are.
You got it?
Yeah.
Sweet. So you can see that in Prop 71. Starts off with the experiment ID, then the variant ID, the experiment ID, variant ID, so on and so on and so on. So if we look at how that comes through into Adobe, Prop 71. All I'm doing there is dropping that in. Then you can see how that pulls through. So I'm going to swap out the occurrences for the number of visits. Cool, so we know that these are split up with the first number being the experiment ID. If you need to find out what those are defined as, the guys at Red Eye should have that. So if you do need to find out what those relate to, just give them a shout and they'll send over the full map. So what I'm going to do is try and copy that out.
Does that list all the different tests that are running? Is that right? Yeah.
So it's not necessarily running, it's just within that time period, that's what's fired.
Right. Okay.
So if I were to go here and create a new segment, and then say it starts with that. So my reasoning being there, obviously we'd have multiple variants running in that specific experiment. So if you say it starts with that, it then returns every single one of them that is the other variants on top of that. So if you want to find out what's control and what's V1 and things, just get in touch with Red Eye and they'll be able to tell you. So all I'm going to do there is drag that in and drop Prop 71 on top of it. And fingers crossed. we can see there that that's everything that follows it. So it could be a case of we've got multiple ones running at the same time, but by the looks of it, we've probably just pushed 100% to that. So if I was to push that back a bit further, hopefully get a bit of a...
Do you think that just go, okay, this is a winner, so whilst we
Yeah,
wait
we
for
can't
the
get it into, yeah, we can't get it in, and then push it.
Coolio.
There you go. Those are probably your two variants. So from there you could then go, okay, that's how many visits we've had. And say for example if it was on BBY funnel, and we want to know how many conversions we could have, we'd just create a segment that says, these are all the people that completed the BBY funnel. And here's one I made earlier. Drag that in as a segment on the end, and just drag in your metric underneath that. So therefore, in a nutshell, you've just created your actual dimension at the end of it. How many people buy each variant of your experiment, which one's the most successful. Because you just work out your conversion metrics off the top of it.
Which takes 10% of their time to do it as well.
So there's other things that we sometimes track as well, like engagement with fields or drop-off rates. I'm just thinking, would you need to a number of tables to get, because I guess what we see through them is just a list of everything. Is that, could you get it in one view here? Or
Essentially, yeah. It's just a case of just creating the relevant segments, what you're looking at, or like revenue tracking, bounce rate, everything like that. Because it can also be dragged in as different fields, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could just set up like a condition where it's like prop 71 where variant equals this. If you're isolating a particular campaign activity you wanted to do an analysis on, and then use all the techniques that you picked up, free-form tables, the dashboard, all that sort of stuff, any other metrics that's there, whether it's conversion on a product or whatever it might be, to be able to slice and dice an analysis if they're not.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool. Does that make sense to everyone, by the way? Sweet. Anything else? Has anyone got any questions on that? Do we all keep that a bit further?
Might be helpful to work through with you for the first one then.
Absolutely fine. Well, I'll tell you what,
Together.
for the next session, do you guys want to bring in like an experiment that you've already run, get the IDs from Red-Eye, and we'll build out that table, and we'll like pull together a full dashboard for it. Because what we could really do, we could pull in a generic report like we did for the URL ones. All you guys need to do is then create a segment that says contains this experiment ID, drop that in the top, and then there you go.
And we will eventually have revenue tracking with, or do we already have it?
Already in there. That's all you need to do.
Oh, cool.
It's not 100% because we've realised, particularly for BBY and things like that, it's only capturing the revenue that gets captured at the time, because obviously it couldn't capture the entire value of that member.
Yeah.
So say for example, if you're on a monthly basis, and your entire value, you signed up for a 12-month contract, but you're only paying your first £100, you're only going to be captured for £100. Those figures look really worrying when we first looked into it before we realised what was actually going on with it. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell really. Any questions from you guys on the phone?
No, thanks, Chris.
No problem. Yeah, thanks everyone for attending, and yeah, no worries. Thanks very much.